are underground,
come join the clownets.
where none of the children will ever be found.
We'll float down there. Yes, we do.
They wandered away to join the show and lost their way in the world below.
Time to float.
They joined the circus and left their town. Now they live here down with the clown. 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 Down with the clown.
Hello fellow Mudbeards, Pennywise fans, and anyone else who thinks Welcome to Derry has proved the Losers Club was lucky. See, Welcome to Derry is a series following the history of Pennywise every 27 years going backwards from when the Losers Club actually defeated him. And I just gotta say, this was a brutal start to the series. Not only in its opening 5 minutes, but in its opening episode altogether. This episode did a really good job establishing some comfort and predictability that really made some of the twists hit a little bit harder. And I'm hoping they stick to this flow of things for the rest of the season. Either way, today we finally get a look at some of Pennywise's victims who weren't as fortunate as the Losers Club. Fans of the channel, or even my Welcome to Derry videos, should know that I've been rooting for this series to take some risks with its characters. Because with every good series, when there is stakes, you have to establish those sort of risks to really keep people interested in the situations the characters find themselves in. And you definitely want to avoid the idea of introducing a red shirt in any way. But what is a red shirt exactly? Well, this terminology was actually coined in the Star Trek series. Essentially, when you have the main cast going up against a big bad alien who needs to establish themselves as a threat for maybe just an episode or two, you don't want to risk killing off one of the main cast and either finding a replacement or leaving that hole in the rest of the series. So you would simply introduce new characters wearing red shirts. These characters were subject to little development and were very quick to be killed off in any sort of scenario. And when it comes to TV shows, a lot of horror series fail in establishing red shirts and killing them off properly. But I can safely say Welcome to Derry introduced some very interesting red shirts and killed them off in a very interesting way. And again, spoilers if you really don't want to hear any more, but essentially this entire first episode set up another group of kids to investigate some of the strange paranormal activity going on in Derry. And with the dynamic these kids had amongst each other and how they bounced back and forth, you'd be quick to assume that this is this series' version of the Losers Club who we're going to be watching throughout the show. If you've seen my recent videos, you could tell that I was kind of rooting for maybe the kids to get picked off one by one, maybe every single episode. And I really didn't think that they would kill any other kids off besides the opener of the series. But let's talk about the opener of the series just a little bit more. Everyone could tell from a mile away that this kid was done for, especially if you'd seen the trailers for the show. But oh my gosh, the visuals we got accompanying his death were pretty darn brutal. And while I wish there was more details given on how exactly he went down, considering we saw that weird baby demon flying against the window and his binky flying out as well, I still think some of the whole pregnancy sequence was disturbing enough that it really solidified how terrifying Pennywise can truly be. And you could argue that kid should have just kept walking and never got in the car in the first place. But if Pennywise can convince you that an entire perfect American family is actually trying to kill you, then you'd have to assume things would only be worse wandering through the woods by yourself in the middle of the night. No, Welcome to Derry decided to tackle the most brutal aspects of Pennywise's methods of toying with people as they could. And with any horror film or TV show, you have to give the opening kill enough merit. As I argued earlier with the Star Trek comparison, you really have to establish the risks that some of these characters will face going forward. A prime example of a franchise that did this well would be the Scream franchise. With its very first movie and its advertising material, you would think that Drew Barrymore would be the lead of the franchise. But then you quickly get the rug pulled from under you and realize she's just the first of many, many victims. Nowadays, you tend to get a lot of series that kill off some important characters earlier on, but during the 90s, this was a pretty big deal. A more modern take on establishing a character well enough to kill them off early for some righteously deserved shock value would be that with the character of Ned Stark from Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is a long-spanning epic, and in both the books and the TV series, they established how certain decisions can lead to your own compromise at the end of the day. This was brilliantly told with the character of Ned Stark, who, while taking all of the noble and heroic actions any character of a sci-fi series who is a hero would take, in the reality of this fantasy land, taking certain actions gets you killed. And that is what made so many of the other characters of the series that much more attachable. Because it didn't matter how much development a character got, it didn't matter which direction a character was actually headed, any character was up for being killed off at any point. So, going into any horror series, I am always rooting for this. And while we have yet to see the rest of Welcome to Derry and how its season will play out, I'm feeling a little confident that its brutality will keep pushing forward. And that's something the It films were really missing. Now, the first It film was an absolute masterpiece, and I really enjoyed it all the way through. And as someone who knew where the books were going and had even watched the old series, I still felt like a lot of these kids were at risk for being taken out by Pennywise. Now, when it comes to It Chapter 2, that was a little more disappointing. But either way, Welcome to Derry is finally taking risks with the characters that I've been hoping for since the very first film. And while the CGI for this baby demon was a little bit questionable at points, all in all, I'll say this was a pretty awesome sequence. I also thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the development these characters got, even to the most minute detail. Part of me was worried that some of the performances would be pretty lackluster considering they're child actors, but I was genuinely sold by a lot of the characters' dynamics between each other. And now we have it firmly established that going forward, none of these characters are actually going to be safe. This entire sequence just pretty much made me think of what would have happened if the Losers Club, while looking at the footage of Pennywise back in the first movie, what exactly would have happened if those characters were actually at risk like the characters in this show were. Imagine if during that sequence Pennywise reached out and just killed Beverly, Richie, and whoever else he could grab at the time. This makes me wonder if the series will sort of establish what Pennywise's capabilities actually are, and how he chooses his targets, outside of him thirsting for fear. I also enjoyed some of the other references to Stephen King's works, like with Juniper Asylum, which apparently Lily herself had gone to. This was after the death of her father that essentially killed him and potentially even left parts of his bodies in different pickle jars across Derry. One thing to note about this story is it really makes you sympathize with Lily as a character, but given how they approach the characters at the very start of this episode, I'm thinking there's a little bit more with Lily's story with her father than we're getting on in the first place. But another character I really enjoyed this episode was actually Dick Halloran. Now, we barely got much of him throughout this episode, and that's kind of my point. I'm thinking throughout this series, Dick Halloran is going to be a very central figure going forward, especially considering his shine capabilities, meaning he has powers that Pennywise hasn't faced or potentially won't face until he maybe fights the Losers Club. I'm still not 100% sure if they actually did have the shine, but let me know down below. Either way, in this series, they approach the character very subtly, which I think is the best way to do it. But I want to know what you guys think. Did you enjoy the opener to Welcome to Derry? What are some of your theories for where the show will actually go, especially considering this secret military project they keep dropping hints about? Either way, let me know down below. Appreciate your feedback. And remember, we all float down here.